patterns.
Or something.
Yes, exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yo.
and all the ships at sea,
Yep. That's the one.
checking, making sure we're on. We are on. No, it's not a traditional service. Okay, here we go.
Ding, ding, ding.
Today's lesson is entitled, Jesus Goes Fishing. Who here likes to go fishing?
I go catching. I don't go fishing. Otherwise, I read a book.
I hate to go fishing because my dad made me be his rower and I had to keep it in the water exactly at that spot.
Cindy's favorite type of fishing is fly fishing.
Really? Oh my goodness,
He's telling stories again.
yeah, well.
Oh, there's a story behind it. We don't have time for that today.
Okay.
Let's start with prayer. We start. Gracious Lord, we thank you that you went fishing for disciples. And help us as you call us then to become fishers of people, catching them alive for you. We ask this in your most precious name. Amen. I entitled this, Jesus Goes Fishing. I think Michael Card in his book called it Jesus the Fisherman. And here we're going to meet up with two main characters. It's interesting to me. I gave you two sets of stuff. The second one, I don't know if we're going to get to, is how many calls were there? And it depends who you read, and the document there will take you through some of it. Because Matthew and Mark also have Jesus with fishing, getting Simon, Peter, and Andrew, and then he gets James and John. But there are a lot of differences in it. I mean, if you look at it, this is the only one with the, well, when we get the miraculous catch of fish in here, this is the only of the three that does that. So it seems to me they're a little bit different. So I found this as an interesting quote. Do you agree with this quote? Jesus will never command the disciples to do something he has not first perfectly demonstrated in his own life. Think about that. Let me read it to you one more time. Jesus will never command the disciples to do something he has not first perfectly demonstrated in his own life. Thinking about walking on water, and you have to go to Matthew's gospel for that. Jesus is demonstrating it, I suppose, and then Peter has, takes his eyes off. It's an interesting thought. Not sure exactly if it's true and all, but it's an interesting thought to think of. So, we're going to jump into this text, see where we go with it. As you wish, whenever you want to stop at something, make some hand motion or something, and if I ignore you, it's accidental at this point, hopefully not. Ready? Verse 1. As the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear God's word, he was standing by Lake Gennesaret. Pressing in on is interesting to me. I like to push against. They were pushing against one another. Years and years ago when I was a vicar, I happened to be in Bethesda, Maryland as a vicar, and the youth wanted to go downtown on the 4th of July. Have you ever been downtown on the 4th of July?
No.
It's busy downtown D.C. Well, they wanted to go down because that year the Beach Boys were singing right kind of, well, you know where the Washington Monument is? Well, down by the road, that's where they had the stage. And so we got there at 8 o'clock in the morning because, well, we had a kid who was a high school graduate named Tom who had a van. So everybody, we had about 20 people in the van. He had no seats in the back of the van. That's back when you could do stuff like that. So all these people were sitting in there, and so we got out, and so we had several quilts, and we put them out, and we were maybe 20, 25 feet from the stage.
Wow.
Good seats, right? So we had to have somebody stay there while other people went, and all through the day. So it was fine until the Beach Boys come out. I want to say 4. I don't remember what time it was, but it was late in the afternoon. And when that happened, we were about 10 feet from the stage because of the push. That's what it's like. That's kind of what you get here, right? People were pressing in. Hopefully people weren't pushed into the water or anything. But Jesus, seeing that, it's interesting that he will do something. Oh, I was supposed to make a comment on Lake Gennesaret. That's interesting because Luke is the only one, first of all, who calls it a lake. Everybody else calls it the,
Sea.
except for, they call it the Sea of Galilee. Except for John, he will call it the Sea of Tiberias. Interesting. Now, why? I wondered that. Why would Luke call it a lake? I wonder if it's because Luke had all these travels across a real sea, the sea, Mediterranean Sea. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But it's just interesting. There's a little interesting detail. There's probably nothing to that. But it just caught my attention. And again, they came to hear God's word. That's why they came. I think that's important. But isn't it interesting that here in Luke, who does give us a lot of the teaching words that Jesus said, we here have absolutely nothing about that, right? Luke's attention is going to be on something else. What is Luke's attention on in this lesson, do you think? What is his focus? It's on the call, isn't it? Calling of disciples. But isn't it interesting that it really focuses in on one person? Doesn't it? Where is Andrew mentioned in this text? Is he mentioned at all?
No.
No. I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to explain why, because I can't explain why. I can just ask the question, all right? So there's no time reference except it is, it appears to be morning after a night of alleged fishing on their part. And that's important too, because they had been fishing. And, well, here we go. Verse 2. He saw two boats at the edge of the lake. Now, two boats, because we know there was Simon and his brother Andrew had one boat, and their partners were James and John. With their dad, Zebedee, they had another boat, right? So there are a couple of boats there. And of course, whose boat is he going to get in? It's going to be Simon's boat. Do you think that's by accident?
No.
It's not by accident. It was a choice, a conscious choice. The fisherman, it's an interesting word, halius, fisherman is actually a very old Homeric word. That's what I found in the dictionary. But it came back into common use, and it's the only place in Luke's gospel that this expression occurs, although Matthew and Mark both use it twice. It's interesting that the fishermen, and what are they doing? Verse 2, what are they doing?
Washing the nets.
They are washing their nets. Why do you wash nets?
Would you say where or why? What was the question? Where or why?
Why do you wash nets?
To get the seaweed and the junk out of it so you can catch fish the next time you go fishing.
When do you wash nets?
When you finish fishing.
Had they caught any fish?
No.
They had caught no fish.
But
And so one of the questions you can ask is, why then, if you wash fish, if you wash nets after they catch fish, they didn't catch any fish, you're saying seaweed, I don't know if there's seaweed there or something, but isn't it interesting? Now, if you look at Matthew and Mark, do you remember what Andrew and Simon are doing? They're casting their net in the shallow there. Interesting. And James and John are, I think the word is mending their nets. But isn't it interesting here that we have them washing their nets? I don't know. That's interesting to me at least. He, that's Jesus, got into one of the boats which belonged to Simon. I thought it was Simon and Andrew, but that's okay. And asked him to put out a little from the land. Then he sat down and was teaching the crowds from the boat. Is that a good place to sit and teach, by the way? Sound travels pretty good, actually, if you're not too far out. Sound will travel good. It gives Jesus a little space. I know if you have people right up against you, it'd be hard for other people to see and all. And notice that Jesus is sitting. That is the traditional way that they taught there. Put out a little is interesting. It's a couple of little words out there of epinako, To put out to sea is kind of, it's one of those words, or to return, and also could be used that way, but I think originally it specifically was more the put out to sea. And then the oligos is just a little or a few or short, it's kind of an adverb there, so together they make up, just to put out a little bit there, not too far from the shore, so Jesus could speak to the crowd. This is where Luke should have had the scribe writing down all of what Jesus said, but there's nothing that Jesus said. I'm always disappointed that the words of Jesus, there aren't more of them. I understand they had limited that they could write, I guess. Things were expensive to write now. Today, everybody would have their cell phone out, would be taping Jesus or recording it somehow, but we would have all of these copies. I mean, you see these things on TV where there are the confrontations between anybody, different groups of people, and you see them do this like that. Good morning.
Hello. I'm the substitute piano player for 11 o'clock.
Ah, okay.
Wonderful.
Hi,
Hi, how you doing?
I'm Jim. I'm Pastor here.
Hi, David Sherry.
David. So we'll have some choir people coming soon, hopefully.
Okay.
So they can help you out. If
All right,
not, we'll
sorry
be.
to interrupt.
No,
That's okay.
Hi, David.
Hi,
How are you?
how are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Sorry, we're putting out. Don't know where it was. Putting out. Okay.
Let them. We're putting out and letting them.
And also, it was teaching. So Jesus did a lot of teaching, obviously. And so we'll go to verse 4. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Now, what's wrong with these instructions? When do you fish? They fished at night. That's when they fished.
Well, that's good, that can be a good time.
What's the other thing? What had they been doing? Apparently, they'd been fishing all night. He's going to tell us hadn't caught anything. So it's going to be the wrong time that you're going to be doing it. So just interesting. Put out into the deep water. Again, we're going to have that, go out farther, go out to sea. But what's interesting that I thought was interesting is that second person singular. Now that's kind of like, Peter, you put out. This is one of those command type things in imperative form. So put out. So he's talking to Simon himself. You put out, remember it's Simon and Andrew's boat, and let down your nets. And let down there is chalao, which is second person, and you all let down your nets. So it's more than one person. So that's a plural form. And so there he's speaking to whoever else is in the boat with Simon. I'm assuming Andrew, but I'm making an assumption. I think it's a reasonable one. There may have been more people there. We don't know. So let down your nets for a catch. Catch. Agra. It's used there. Often used for fish. Okay. Interesting. So is that what they're going to do? What does Simon say?
Well, we did it all night and nothing happened, but if you say so.
You put out
But if you say so. Interesting translation, but at your word. The word rima is used there, so it's that word, it's actually word. At your word, if you say so, we will let down the nets. We've worked hard. So that's an interesting thing too. The sense, to do wearisome labor, labor unto extreme fatigue. It's hard because they didn't have, if you've ever watched the people doing fishing with great big nets and all, today they have all this mechanized stuff, right? But there, what's the mechanized stuff? It's labor. It's pulling in.
Yeah.
And even if it's not filled with fish, it's going to be pretty tough pulling all of that in. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. And so all night we've done that. But if you say so, we'll do it. Why do you think he would go ahead and do it? Why do it? If you're the fisherman who fished this lake your whole life, if you've not fished all night, there weren't any fish, if you know you fish at night, because that's when you fish, that's when you catch the fish, you don't usually do it in the daytime, you don't usually catch fish in the daytime, why did he go ahead and do it?
Jesus told him to, and Jesus didn't tell him why he wanted to do. That's called faith.
Well, Simon calls him master, so he realizes that Jesus is above him or more important than him, or, a leader or a teacher. So when he calls him master, maybe you do what the master tells you to do.
Before we go to Tim, just note that the word master is used in the New Testament only by Luke.
Oh, really?
Interesting. Now, if you find master sometime else, let me know. We'll go look it up and make sure the word is there. But this word, epistates, is used only of Jesus, only in the New Testament. You can see some references there in the little box. And interestingly, he never uses rabbi, but John especially uses rabbi. Again, I can't explain why, I can just point out the word. Tim, I'm sorry.
Today we would say that person was so charismatic that people just were drawn to him.
There's something about Jesus.
Yeah.
Is this the first experience that Simon has had with Jesus?
No.
No. Remember that. He's had at least one. I'm going to suggest more than one, but at least one, right? What's the one that you remember? John chapter 1, we looked at that, right? Remember, Andrew finds his brother Simon and brings him to Jesus. You are Simon, and you shall be called Cephas, which means Peter, type thing. That's happened before this. This is after, that happened before Jesus then went up to Galilee. I'm going to suggest the other paper I gave to you that I don't think we're going to get to probably, would say, I'm going to suggest, I don't think that the Matthew and Mark thing are the same as the Luke one. I think they're a different event, but that's me. You can choose what you wish. And when I say that, I go against a lot of pretty smart Bible scholars, but there are other smart Bible scholars who would agree with me. So it depends who you listen to, who you think. But I think there are too many differences. That's my opinion. There are too many differences. It sounds like a different event, because I don't think that Mark and Matthew would have forgot about, they're going out to fish and they catch these fish, and Peter's, I'm a sinful man, get away from me type stuff. So I think that's all in there. But Master, we've worked hard all day, but at your word, if you said so, we'll let down the nets. Okay? We're going to let down the nets.
By the way, notice, what I noticed was, there's no promise in that. Let down the nets. He doesn't say let down the nets and you'll get fish now. He just says let down the nets.
We're following your word.
Yep.
You say put them down, we'll put them down. Did Jesus say that, guarantee that they're going to?
No.
He says let down your nets for a catch. The implication is that you're going to get something. But Simon could have been, sure, I'll put them down, but
Yeah.
he's saying to himself, we're not going to catch anything. Have you ever gone fishing at the wrong time of day?
Yes.
Is it still called fishing when you do that?
No, it's called meditation.
It's not called not called catching, right? It's not catching at that point. It's fishing, meditation. Okay. Verse 6. When they did this, they caught. I'm sorry, I messed up. I didn't have the correct word for caught there because it's a separate word. And it's an important word, and I really messed up there. They caught a great number of fish, and their nets began to tear. The word is synkleo, and it's an interesting word because it means the following: confine, imprison, I like that word, enclose. And so it is that they enclosed a great number of fish. So think it through, we're talking about a net, right? And so what they're doing is they enclose it. It's a different word than caught used in the previous page, I do believe. So I think that. How many fish did they enclose? It says in verse 6, a great number of fish. Well, we're going to see it's going to be a pretty great number of fish, isn't it? So much so that what happens to the nets?
To tear.
So we're talking about a lot of fish. A lot of fish. And what's interesting is that the word for tear is, the verb tense there is they were continuing to tear. So it's their beginning, it's starting to come apart because there were so many fish there. Is this a miracle?
Probably.
Wrong time of day? Yeah.
Wrong number for that particular environment.
Happened because Jesus said for it to happen, I believe. So they signaled. Some type of hand motion is implied by the word, the use of it. Their partners in the other boat to come and help them. Apparently they were too far out where they could say, hey, come and help. But somehow, today they would be on their cell phone. No, they'd be on the radio out there, right? Come and help. The nets are breaking. Probably need to bring more than one boat out type thing. So they came out to help them. They came and filled both boats so full that what happened to both boats? So this is an abundant catch. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
It is an amazingly abundant catch. There are so many fish that 2 boats are starting to go down. Is that a good thing? You were in the Coast Guard, sir. Have you ever been in a boat that's that full with stuff that is starting?
No.
Is it the gun whales? Is that what they call the
Gunnels.
I'm sorry?
Gunnels.
Gunnels.
gunnels? They were starting to.
Yeah.
So it's not because of waves or anything this time, right? It's just because there's too much there and it's going down. Well, could it have sunk then? The fish would have liked that, right?
Yeah.
Flopping around in there. Okay. Verse 8. How does Simon Peter respond?
Badly.
Badly? What does he say about himself? He does something first. He falls down. Literally, he fell at Jesus' knees. Falls down at Jesus' knees.
But then, and I've never quite understood that. He's not the only man that does this. Like, now that I know that you're so godly and so wonderful, I want you to go away from me? I don't understand that part.
Okay, I think there are a couple of things. His response is to fall down in front of Jesus. That word that could be used, notice the usage, is prospito, is, the words I highlighted were homage, humility, and worship. So it's almost coming down, so maybe there's this thing, he understands he's more than just a regular person, at least, right? He falls before him. And he responds then by saying, I am a sinful man. It says something about that you go away because this is who I am. To me, it shows I don't deserve to be in your presence. That's what I'm getting out of it. Falls down, I don't deserve. The word can be actually used going all the way down, but I'm not sure how they could do that if the thing's full of fish. Can you imagine that? You got all these fish flopping around. Do you have a picture of this in Sunday school materials? Does it show all the... No, that's the picture I want to see, the painting that they always do. All these fish, he's trying to come down at Jesus' knees, and how can he do that? Because the thing's filled with fish.
Yeah.
There's so many fish that it's hard to kneel before him. But he goes down as best he can.
Yeah.
This is who I am. He tells him this is who he is. I am a sinful man. That word is hamatolos, a sinner, someone who's done unrighteous acts. I know who I am. I do not deserve to be in your presence. I think that's why.
Okay.
It's not that he didn't like Jesus, but I don't deserve to be there. Do any of us deserve to be there, though?
Absolutely not.
I mean, that's what all of us could say, right? I go up front a lot to help lead worship. I don't deserve to be there. I'm a sinful person. But God uses sinful people in many different ways, right? Why did he choose Peter? Was Peter such a special guy that he chose him and said, hey, there's something extra special about you? I think he chooses Peter because Peter knows who he is. Peter messes up a lot, and I thank God, thank you that you chose somebody like that, because if you can use him, you can use somebody like me that messes up a lot. Cindy, don't say anything now, please. But think about it. I am a sinful man. Wow.
That makes me think of Paul, chief of sinners though I be.
And what Jesus shed his blood for me. Died that I might live on high, lives that I might never die.
Yeah.
Tim?
But just think that this man is, Peter has, in a short period of time, is witnessing these incredible experiences, and everything about what just happened is contrary to the way it normally is. I mean, he's a fisherman. He knows when you do it and the risk you take, and suddenly the boat is overflowing with fish at the wrong time, day, and all this. So I think he really overwhelmed.
And again, remember, this is not Peter's first experience.
Right.
There's at least one other. I'm going to contend you, but there's at least one other that he hadn't experienced. That's how he gets that Peter nomenclature. So that's pretty important. Somehow he has some history with Jesus, and he knows something about that. I think that's vital to understand. And so, verse 9, for he and all those with him were amazed. Amazed is always a fun word. Thambos, amazement, awe. And it's actually they were amazed, two words. Periach, to become, it's becoming overwhelmingly amazed. I like overwhelmed with amazement. It's kind of throwing two amazement words together to show how amazed they were at the catch of fish that were there. It was surprising. They couldn't believe it. It was wow. And notice who we finally hear of in verse 10. James and John, Simon, Zebedee's sons, who were Simon's partners. But again, my question is, what about Andrew? Where's Andrew? Do you see any mention of Andrew at all here? Was he maybe he was the guy that stayed at home and took care of the money or something. I don't know. But later on, in Matthew and Mark, we have him actually doing stuff there on board as well. So I'm guessing, this is me guessing, because there is that plural use. If you look back in verse 4, it was, right, where there's, you put down, put out is spoken to Simon, and then you all let down your nets. And I think they should do it more. I guess if we were down in the south, we would have y'all let down your nets, right? That would be a southern translation. But that is a plural form there and all. And so everybody's amazed. They were overcome with amazement. They were amazed with amazement, anything like that. How does Jesus respond to Peter falling down before him? I'm a sinful man, and the amazement of people. How does Jesus respond? The first thing he's going to say is what?
Don't be afraid.
How many times did Jesus tell people, do not be afraid?
1 million.
I was supposed to read something, so I just found what I was supposed to read. The miracle of bringing fish into the boat is the miracle of making the unworthy sinner fit to stay in the presence of the holy God. It is the miracle of the forgiveness of sins. See also Isaiah's similar reaction and the absolution that enabled him to serve as a prophet. That's Isaiah 6. Remember Isaiah 6? Isaiah is in the temple, has this vision thing of being in the temple, and he sees the Lord and he says, I'm not worthy to be here, for I'm a sinful person. And so one of the cherubim comes with coals from the altar in the tongs and presses this to his lips. Ouch, that would hurt. And he says, you're cleansed and all. And then he hears, who will go for us? Whom shall I send? And what does he say? Here am I, send me.
Send me.
So there's almost kind of a little bit of maybe a similar thing here. He doesn't say, here I am, send me. But there will be a response in verse 14 because everybody follows after Jesus. They leave everything behind. Think about that for a moment. This is probably the biggest catch they had ever done. Now, I can't document that, right? But it's so big that one boat's being filled to overflowing. The other boat, they're almost starting to sink. They're so full. And what do? When they bring the boats to shore, they left everything and they followed him. Wow, that's pretty impressive. So there is a response. I'm a sinful man. Go away. But Jesus doesn't go away. Instead, he calls them to follow him. Don't be afraid, he begins. This is stuff spoken to an individual, interestingly. From now on, you will be catching. Those words are singular words. You will be catching people alive. Catching is a different word there. Sorry, I didn't write it correctly in Greek. I got the wrong one there. It is, and it's really weird pronunciation. I do stuff not what the dictionary says, but how it sounds to me because I listen to it in my Logos word. So grey-roll. It's a really weird word to say. And the emphasis is to capture alive. It's a different phrase, and it implies catching them alive. There's an allusion there you can see. So instead of catching fish that are going to die, it's for catching people alive, and it is a different word used here. You need to look at that again and see how many places it's used in the New Testament. But this is the call. You're going to be catching people alive to have a relationship with him. I'm throwing more words that deserve to be there, but that's really what you're going to be talking. And that's why I put the little alive in brackets there, because I think that captures it a little bit more. That's what you're going to be doing. And they followed. They left stuff behind. Now you could say, Zebedee, Dad, James and John. Peter's going to hang out in Capernaum later on. We're going to see him there. So apparently somebody's still running the business. I happen to believe Dad's still around or something. I don't know. Hired hands and things like that. Day laborers and nothing else.
Do you think they left all those fish that they had just caught in the boat?
Oh, good question.
See, if they went to all that trouble and went out into the deep water and everybody was amazed, and it says, then they brought the boats to land and left everything. And that means all those fish that they had just
But
caught.
maybe not. Maybe some of those underlings sold all the fish, and that made a foundation, which is why they kept the business running.
Yeah. That's why you need a little more under left everything.
That's
What
right.
was everything?
That's right.
Well, we're talking about they. Who are they then? We've had at least 3 people listed by name. Simon, James and John. Andrew is also going to be leaving everything. So those are the they who are leaving. And again, I think you have to remember that it's James and John. Zebedee, it sounds like Zebedee, Dad, is in partnership with his sons. We don't hear who's in partnership with Simon and Andrew, except Simon and Andrew. But I'm guessing somebody is there. Some part of the family still be it. So I think, this is me, the way I'm interpreting it is, they just left it there. You guys take care of it. We're going. Jesus called. We're off. We're out of here. We're leaving. So goodbye. You guys can take care of it, Yeah, I imagine a lot of folks came to see that. Look at these boats. They're filled. It's our fish. And what are you going to do with all the fish? You going to put it in the freezer?
Sell it.
You salt them, boil them, things like that. But you're going to have to be doing something with them. Otherwise, it's going to stink pretty bad. It won't take long for that to happen.
But there were lots of other fishing boats around. Maybe they divided up the catch.
That's what I was thinking.
Isn't it interesting, though? Again, nothing said about that. We're off and on
Right,
something
right,
else.
right, right.
His focus is on Simon.
Yeah.
He's the secondary character. Jesus, obviously, is the main character. Simon is the secondary character. James and John are somebody else that's kind of thrown in. And Andrew, who's got to be there someplace, I think, is there too. But he's nothing said about him. Just he's left out entirely. I wonder. He'd probably read Luke and go, why didn't you put me in here? I was there too.
Well,
That's
when you have a brother like Peter, you probably get kind of quiet. You don't really want to be noticed too much.
I remember, I have a brother and a sister, both of them are older. Sister's oldest than my brother. And then being the youngest, coming up through school, I had your sister, I had your brother.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there are always expectations based on those. My brother is very athletic. I am not very athletic, never have been, never will be. And so, oh, you're John's brother. You know, it's not, oh, and,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
I don't know. So, interesting. All three graduated from college, I guess, so can't say any more than that. I'm the only one with an MDiv though, ooh, whoopee. So what do you think? Mr. Tim?
I think it's like when he told the rich man to leave everything and follow me. Suddenly you've got a catch that you've never seen before under circumstances that shouldn't have been that way. And are you really ready to follow me and just walk away?
What would you do if Jesus said, follow me, and I want you to go, would you go? Oh, it gets harder. I have a quote to read you. It's a long quote. I thought this was a good quote. I borrowed this from Mr. Card. Last 3 paragraphs on his chapter about his lesson from Luke 5. So I'll read this. Tell me what you think. If we are to be honest, we'll admit that to follow, to really leave everything behind, is an absolutely terrifying prospect. Our most natural respondents would be like Simon, to fall down and say, go away. This is more than I can deal with. I couldn't be the person you're looking for. We stand before these terrifying possibilities, to let go of our security, to open ourselves to the frightening possibility of complete and utter success. That's an interesting thought. To leave all that is familiar and safe for an unsafe world. But then we notice that standing beside us is Jesus. He confidently whispers, don't be afraid. Let go of the nets. Do not be afraid. After all, it's me. Jesus has shown Simon that the sea he thought was empty was in fact full of fish. And Simon has begun to learn what it means to become partners with Jesus. A new kind of fishing lies ahead. There comes a point in our lives when all the pieces of our past, both good and bad, come together to make a meaningful whole. It came for Peter at this point. At this time, he had been fishing for fish with varying success. Now Jesus tells him it is men and women he will be fishing for, and it makes such complete and perfect sense to Peter that he simply walks away from his old life and embraces the unknown new. Jesus, the carpenter from Nazareth, was also, it seems, a fisherman, and it was Simon Peter who got caught that day. Interesting. Anything else on this you want to talk about?
The boats that they were in were very sturdy. I mean, from what we saw, and when they found one in the sea many years later in the mud and stuff, I mean, they were very sturdy boats and huge. Now, we went out on the Sea of Galilee, but that was a Greek design boat. It wasn't the same as that, but the one that they found and renovated, they're very sturdy. I mean, heavy wood. If you've ever
You
made,
showed us pictures when we went to the Tidewater.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
and even if you built one of those dinghies that they built, Jerry and our grandsons built a dinghy at the
Maritime Museum.
Museum. And I mean, it was huge, and it was good size and heavy. It was really heavy. And we sold it because we just couldn't launch it. But a gentleman needed to have something sturdy he could stand up in, and he bought it for a lake at a private golf course community where he needed to clean out the grasses with a rake. So, I mean, they were very sturdy boats. They were pretty good size, and yet here they had all these fish, and they needed another boat to help strengthen the thing. I mean, it really is amazing when you're thinking about it.
Fish get heavy.
Yeah.
If you have, I mean, if this were the boat here inside this, if this were filled with fish, that'd be a lot of weight, and it would be putting it down. Tim?
I've often thought of this passage that if the natural thought would be, well, if I'm going to take someone and make them fishers of men, I'll go to some seminary and find this one theologian to lead this. And here he chooses a rough and hewn fisherman. And I mean, Peter must have thought, you know, I've never done this. All I've done in my life is fish, and you're going to teach me to be a fisher of men.
It's interesting, if you choose someone who has no experience in doing that to which you will teach them, it might be easier because you don't have to unteach the bad to teach the good.
No, and we're so stupid about credentialing, because I was just reading this morning, we're losing an enormous amount of our workforce because most Americans, the majority of Americans have not been college educated. And yet many of them have far superior skills for what we need in our business, and yet we require a college degree. So it's sort of the same thing.
I guess we have time to look at the second piece if you'd like to. How many calls? This was my work trying to figure out. Here's the question. How many calls did Jesus make to bring Simon, Andrew, James, and John into the band of disciples? To talk about the problem, we have to look at 4 lessons. We looked at John 1, 40 to 42 before, okay? This is one we did. This is where he gives that name. I call it the prophetic title of Peter, that he grows into. That was my emphasis. It's used a second time in Matthew 16, 18, where Peter professes Jesus to be the Christ, but not in the parallels of Mark or Luke. And then this one we have where Jesus tells Simon, and it's Simon. That's the thing that I guess I was learning in this one, because it's a second person singular. You will be catching. You, not you all, but you will be catching. And then they, that's plural. They, plural, brought the boats to land. They, plural, left everything. And they, plural, followed him. So others will be following as well. But it's interesting to me that the call is there. And then we have Jesus' call to all 4, Simon and Andrew, James and John in Matthew 4, 18 to 22, and Mark 1, 16 to 20. Those are both identical, so I thought just a little bit on Mark's version. In Mark's version, we see Simon and Andrew casting a net into the sea. Isn't that interesting? So they're not washing their nets, they're casting their nets into the sea. That's why I'm going, is this the same? I don't know. That's different from the calling we have in Luke. They're washing here in Luke. We can see they're washing their nets. There's no miraculous catch of fish in the Matthew or Mark version. Instead, Jesus calls them immediately, follow me and I will make you fish for people. And then, of course, being Mark, since that's the one I like to follow, immediately they left their nets and followed him. So we have there Simon and Andrew following Jesus. And then it's a 2-part call, because then he goes on, going a little farther. He saw James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat putting their nets in order. So they're taking care of their nets after fishing all night type thing. And of course, then immediately, there's that favorite word, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with their hired men and followed him. 4 are called, 2 separate callings, nets are involved, but Simon and Andrew are casting net into the sea. James and John are putting their nets in order. None will be told to go out and put their nets down and receive an overabundant catch of fish. This is my opinion. It's only my opinion, and I'm saying that extra times to make sure. I don't think that can be the same story that we just read. I think it's a separate one. So then you have, I got to go through it, all of it. Many biblical scholars will suggest that they're all telling the same story in different ways. The first quote is from Michael Cart. We find the 2 of them once again beside the lake. Simon, the fisherman, has been walking with Jesus, the carpenter, for several months now. It's been almost a year that he met Jesus. Mark, who records Peter's version of the story, tells no fewer than 10 events between the first meeting and this amazing moment. Dr. Herber, I had Dr. Herber actually at Concordia Seminary, in this Concordia Self-Study Bible, that's the NIV version one, where it says, left everything and followed him. This is not the first time these men had been with Jesus. Obviously, we have the John 1 part. Their periodic and loose association now becomes a closely knit fellowship as they follow the Master. The scene is the same as Matthew 4 and Mark 1, but the accounts relate events from different hours in the morning. It's the same event, but different hours, the same day. Okay. This is me. It's just me. And I think I can make this assessment. You can make your own. I have 2 quotes on the next page that I'm pulling out. The first one is from Jameson and Fawcett and Brown on a critical commentary, whole Bible thing. Not their first call, however, recorded in John 1, nor their second recorded in Matthew 4, but their third and last before their appointment to the apostleship. That these calls are distinct and progressive seems quite plain. Similar statures are observable in other eminent servants of Christ. Eminence is a fun word. And then Wiersbe from the Bible Exposition Commentary. This event is not parallel to the ones described in Matthew 4 and Mark 1. In those accounts, Peter and Andrew were busy fishing, but in this account they had fished all night and caught nothing and were washing their nets. If nets are not washed and stretched out to dry, they rot and break. Okay, that's good news to know. Jesus had enlisted Peter, Andrew, James, and John earlier, and they had traveled with him to Capernaum and Galilee, but then they went back to their trade. Now he would call them to a full life of discipleship. So I put all that together, and this is what I came up with. I think, then, that Peter gets this name, Peter, in John 1. And I think Jesus calls them to follow him, and Matthew and Mark. And they do, but it's not really full time, leaving everything behind. And I think it's finally here in this third one that they do. Now, you're free to say it's the same, all 3 of those, Matthew, Mark, Luke are all on the same day at different times. I have a hard time with that. It just doesn't make sense to me. But it also is kind of interesting that then if Jesus called them, they went back to their life. It was kind of, it's almost like try it out for a while and let's see how it goes. And they go back, and then Jesus says, no, you'll come and follow me. And so, boom. So that's interesting. I don't know. So it's an interesting discussion. Like I said, some people will agree with me, some will disagree with me, and you're free to go wherever you want to with it. But I think you can make them work either way if you think about it. I'm just saying the way that makes sense to me. But we come down to the same point at the end of all of them, that we now have these 4 who will be disciples who are following Jesus. Even though Luke 5 doesn't even mention Andrew by name, which I find very funny, interesting, and strange. But something, he will be a follower of Jesus. And obviously, James and John. I guess the reason I see that Simon, James, and John are mentioned so much here is they become the big 3, if you will, right? They become the big 3 of the big 12 type thing. So they're the 3 that are the closest. And Simon is the main character besides Jesus in this calling, because he's going to be the one who's close to Jesus of all 3 of those of the 12. So that's how it makes sense to me. But that's all I got. What do you think? Is it the same event or the other events?
Well, one of the interesting things to me, it's not the only time we're confused about timings in the Bible, and I have to go back to the idea that time wasn't something that God is concerned with. He's today, tomorrow, and yesterday all at the same time. And so it really isn't important about the timing for that reason.
They didn't look at their watches?
No, I don't think so. They didn't even have smartphones. How about that?
That's why they couldn't record. That's why he did get all those words. But don't you want to know what Jesus talked to the crowd about there? Wouldn't that have been great, to hear that type of thing? Anybody else?
We will.
Yep, we will.
I guess we're done. Do we have time? Oh, we have 10 minutes. Wow.
Wow. How about a luxury?
Can we go through it again? No. There are just some interesting things. Why does he call it a lake as opposed to a sea? Why is he called master? Those are just interesting things. I just wonder about those. Some unique points, I guess. Let's close with a prayer. We'll let you leave early and enjoy the beautiful, it's sunny now. It was kind of overcast when the service began earlier today. Okay. Have a short prayer. Gracious Lord, we thank you that you call people, that you call sinners to follow after. Of course, that's the only type of people you could have called to follow you. But help us to see that even when you called these folks, it really could be somebody like us. Help us to see that we then can follow after you, and that we can then be people who you use to catch people alive. Help us, Lord, to see that power of one, to help us that we might tell who you are to us, what you mean to us, to others, and then let you do the changing of hearts and lives. And we thank you that we have the example of Simon, who became this Peter, a great man of faith, but that we get to see his transformation before our very eyes. And that gives each of us hope that if you could use Peter, you can use us. So use us. Help us to always follow and to catch people alive. We ask this in your most precious name. Amen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our class is over. Don't forget your newsletters today.
I want to go.